What chance do I have? I had a dream of running a campaign based on bimetallism, the Mayflower Declaration, and Carneo's circumscription theory. But the major parties have the machines and the money.
Abe Lincoln had powerful opponents. So did every other dreamer who ever tried to lift his thought up off the ground. Odds against him didn't stop those people. They were fools that way. All the good that ever came into this world came from fools with faith like that. You know that, Kion. You can't quit now.
You're right. I'm gonna get up there with that lady that's up on top of this Capitol dome, that lady that stands for liberty. Take a look at this country through her eyes if you really want to see something, and you won't just see scenery. You'll see the whole parade of what people carved out for themselves after centuries of fighting for something better than just jungle law, fighting so we can stand on our own 2 feet, free and decent like we were created, no matter what race, color, or creed. That's what you'd see.
We're going to run this campaign the old-fashioned way. Let's go make 20 trays of lasagna. We'll have a big supper and ask everybody to kick in $10. We'll use the money to buy lawn signs.
Really? You want me to go make lasagna just so I can run for office? Hold on, can you turn off that music for a second? Thanks, there's this Walking Dead marathon on right now, and I just planned my whole weekend around it, so...
You can't be serious. You would give up the fight against the 2 political machines to restore the power of government to the people this democracy was meant to serve, just so you could... Hey, are you even listening to me?
Don't go out there, Sasha!
We didn't want to hurt you.
Are they eating that guy's leg?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to pull you away from your group or scare you.
But they're not zombies.
Nope, they're cannibals. That guy Gareth is their leader. You're gonna die, Gareth. Rick is gonna wipe that smirk off your face with a machete. What were we talking about, Greg?
I forget.
That's fair play. Now we're out here like everybody else.
Well, anyway, I'm sure other people will carry on the fight against the big political machines. People who aren't afraid to spend their tears and treasure on the battle for a true democracy. This radio show will celebrate their courage and commitment. And now he's still bitter over his third-party bid for Pharaoh. Colin McEnroe.
Yeah, it turns out it's even less democratic in a race for Pharaoh. So let me tell you about what we're doing here today and kind of why, too. So, you might have heard in the speeches that were given there in the intro a little echo of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But as I said before, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is really about somebody appointed to office after a coin flip lands on its edge. The real Mr. and Mrs. Smiths have a much harder time. The people who are not fettered by the constraints of major political parties, they have a much harder time getting elected. And I started thinking about this in particular, or at least what echoes through my head whenever we get ready to do this show, which we do every election cycle. It is actually applies not to a third-party candidate or a write-in candidate, but to it's a memory from 2006 when Ned Lamont was challenging Joe Lieberman. And in the first debate, Joe Lieberman kept almost kind of taunting Lamont by saying, "Who is Ned Lamont? Who is he? Who is? And we don't know who he is. Who is he?" And I was sitting there watching it on home on my TV, and I was almost cheering him on to say, just turn to him and say, "Who do I need to be?" Because I'll tell you who I am. I'm somebody who thinks he can do the job better than you do. That's who I am. Who else do I need to be besides that? I mean, isn't that the way our system works? Well, ideally, it's the way our system works. But there are a lot of people, and 4 of them are sitting in this room right now, who think that they could do a better job than the people running for the major from the major parties. They think there's not enough choice in modern election cycles. And so they've made their own way through different paths. And so every 2 years, we do this show. Now, perhaps unfortunately, initially we commissioned a theme song for the show. We hired Henry Mancini to write it for us, and maybe we chose the wrong term at the time, because what we typically call this show every 2 years when we do it is...
1, 2, 3, 4, get to know your fringe candidate.
And retrospectively, Fringe Candidates was not the right choice. But we're stuck with a song now. We hired a lot of other recording artists like Jill Sobiel, and hip-hop artists self-suffice to do versions of it. So we're just sort of stuck with it. I apologize to the people in the studio. Let me tell you who they are. Rolf Moorer is running as a candidate for state controller with the Green Party, but also running as a write-in candidate for state treasurer. I didn't even know you could do that. We'll find out more about that as we go on. Mayor Ernest Eldridge is a candidate for state representative in the 49th district of Windham and Willimantic. He's the mayor of Windham. He's running on the Bottom Line Party ticket. Todd Cheney is a write-in candidate for state senate in the 6th District of New Britain and Berlin. And Linda Louise Lacasse. Ernie Eldridge and Linda Louise Lacasse, apparently you have to have an alliterative name to do this, is a petitioning candidate for state representative in the 52nd District, which is Somers and Stafford. As we go along here today, you may have questions about why they've chosen to go this route, how difficult it is. 860-275-7266. 860-275-7266. So, Ernie, as you're sitting on my immediate right, I'll start with you. I mean, I think one common thread going around this table is that notion that there isn't really enough choice. And I assume that's one reason why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely correct. We had started back in 2007 to form the Bottom Line Party because we didn't feel as though there was a choice. We either had a party that was too far left and one that was too far right, and we didn't feel as though that it was working properly. And so that's why we formed the Bottom Line Party. We've been very successful in our town. We've held the last 3 positions, the head positions. We had a first selectman, and then we changed to a town manager, mayor form of government, and I've held the post. I was reelected in November.
So is there a specific ideology that the Bottom Line Party sums up? Is there something that's a common thread running through all those candidacies?
Absolutely correct. People before politics. It's a simple thread. I've heard it on other people's when they're giving out advertisement as far as them running, but that came from ours. People before politics. Accountability is a big thing, and I don't feel as though that a lot of the major parties are accountable for what their actions are, and I think that the Bottom Line Party can serve them better.
I mean, a lot of people would say, well, I could run a people before politics campaign as a Democrat or a Republican. Why do I need to start a whole new party and introduce that new element?
Well, as I said before, one is too far left, the other is too far right. We run kind of the middle of the road is where I run. I sometimes can be conservative, sometimes I can be the other way. But I think that it's just what the people would like is to have someone that's accountable, someone that they can talk to, someone they can sit down. And being successful, I mean, I've reelected as mayor, so we must be doing something correctly.
Indeed. So as we go along here, as I said, if you have a question, 860-275-7266. 860-275-7266. Before I introduce the other 3, I'm going to say that we're going to talk with each one of them about what they specifically believe, why it is that they are running, what set of what their platform is, but we're also going to talk about the difficulties of this. It's Willimantic, I think, is kind of an exception, and just the degree to which third-party politics have worked pretty well there. But by and large, this is a pretty hard thing to do. There's some real structural impediments to it. We'll talk about what those are too as we go along. So, Rolf Maurer, you really are doing kind of a remarkable thing. You're the Green Party's candidate for comptroller. You're a write-in candidate for treasurer. Maybe before we go through some of your ideas, and you have a lot of ideas. I just went through a 3-page small type list of a lot of really interesting ideas that you've got. Before we start out on those, though, why are you running for 2 offices at once?
Well, for the Green Party, it's about boosting our visibility. There are many barriers for what I prefer the term additional parties as opposed to third parties in terms of how the media operates, public perception shaped by the media, to a large extent what's going on with the Secretary of State's office, and what I've seen over the years running for various offices going on in the polls. So it's admissible to run for 2 offices. You can't, of course, if you win by the remote chance you win for both offices, you can't hold both of them if it's even physically possible. That would be illegal. And of course, in 2000, Joe Lieberman ran both as vice president and also was trying to run to retain his position in the Senate. So it's not without precedence.
No, it's not without precedent. It was a little bit more unusual to be running for 2 essentially adjacent constitutional offices at the same time. But Godspeed is what I say. And just quickly, just sketch out a few of the ideas that you think are keys to your candidacy.
Well, my platform statement, it revolves pretty much about 3 or 4 concepts. Transitioning to a hemp-based economic infrastructure for the state of Connecticut. I just learned recently that the latest version of the Farm Bill has a provision to legalize a hemp industry in the United States, and now there are 10 states that are looking to legalize it, not cannabis, but hemp. Mm-hmm.
In what sense? I never understand this. All this has to be explained to me anew. But I feel like I've owned, I don't know, clothing that was made out of hemp and stuff that was. I mean, in what sense is hemp not legal and in need of legalization?
Well, it used to be legal in this country, of course, in the founding days. And it was rendered illegal before World War II. Then it was made legal, and then it became illegal again. And it was part of the war effort for war material. But the neat thing about it is that it's very diverse. You can do so many things with it. You can make, of course, foodstuffs, supplements, nutrients. We're finding out there are a lot of medical applications for cannabis alone, which is, of course, a related plant. And most famously, it's known that Henry Ford produced a prototype automobile that ran on hemp fuel.
So it's an incredibly versatile substance.
Yeah.
All right, so hemp. Mention one or two other ideas.
Plastics.
Mention one or two other ideas about your candidacy.
Oh, right, yeah. Another concern, and these are two closely related concerns, have to do with protecting the electrical grid in Connecticut and potentially the whole country from the prospect of coronal mass ejection.
That's like a solar flare, basically.
Yeah, this is something that a solar flare produces that can just totally destroy the electrical system. And we've had episodes of like this in the past in the 1920s and I think late 1850s, when this phenomenon was first identified by, his name was Carrington, a British scientist. And back then, the extent of electrical and communication technology was telegraph systems. And they were all burned out because of this thing.
And a coronal mass ejection aimed the right or the wrong way. If you think that the Halloween outage of a few years ago lasted a long time, that's nothing. It could really crush the grid. It might be months and months and months before the power got back up. Very quickly, ordinarily this is sort of not the purview of either the comptroller or the treasurer to protect us from solar flares. I mean, what does that have to do with the office you're running for? Or are you just trying to get some important ideas to the forefront?
Well, both. But in the case of what I'm running for in this particular instance, I've mentioned this before in previous runs, it's a good job generator specifically for Connecticut because if so many military contractors, high-tech companies, the utility companies don't want to do anything about this, even though the National Academy of Sciences and NASA brought this issue to Congress. The House completely voted in favor of doing something. Senate didn't because they're closely connected with them. But we have companies like United Technologies, Electric Boat, that have the skills to produce countermeasures to protect key areas of our electrical grid. And it would be a great jobs generator, too, an opportunity for them to get used to diversifying away from just serving the Pentagon because they could sell this material, like surge protectors, to utilities all around the country. A particular concern is nuclear power plants that would be vulnerable to meltdown. We have less than 104 now in the country. They could all potentially become Fukushima scenarios within a week to a month if we have one of these episodes. And there's no way to keep the fuel rods cool.
And I know in general you've got a lot of ideas. I read your position papers about the transitioning of Connecticut from a defense-based economy to a lot more of these kinds of essentially peacetime but very necessary ideas. You got a bunch of ideas about that. But let me just give you a chance to very quickly name one more idea that's sort of part of your platform this time.
The related issue that's of concern to me is seeing if we can make Connecticut a TPP-free zone, that is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's an international trade agreement involving, I believe, 700 corporations that are, for the most part, this is an arrangement that's done with 12 countries, including the United States, that would put the sovereignty of the participating nations in jeopardy because the interests of corporations would always come before the interests of civil society. We found out through WikiLeaks that there are about 24, 25 chapters in it. Only 4 or 5 of this document actually have to do with issues of trade. The rest of them have to do with coordinating other aspects of civil society so that everything serves the profit interests of corporations before what we need in terms of, decent appliances, clean air, and things like that. And if the government on the federal level, a state, even a municipality, does something that a corporation perceives as a threat to its profits, they can be taken to an international court of arbitration, which could supersede the authority of even the Supreme Court.
All right, I'm going to just stop you there just to make sure we have time for all kinds of stuff. Yeah, Rolf also has an idea for a state bank, not unlike the Bank of North Dakota. If we have time, maybe we can circle back to that. That's a really interesting thing. So Todd Cheney, tell us once again what it is you're running for and why you've decided to go this route.
Yeah, so I'm running for the position of state senator in the 6th District, which encompasses New Britain, Berlin, and a piece of Farmington. The number one reason I decided to put my name out there for this is because Terry Geritana, the woman who currently holds the position, she's a Democrat, has no opposition in this race. The Republicans failed to put up a candidate, and no one else wanted to step forward from any party. I decided that the people of New Britain need a choice. There's many people that are happy with what she's done. There's many people that are unhappy with what she's done. I just figured I'd go out there and say, hey, if you need a different choice, I'm here for you.
Let me just ask the Joe Lieberman question. Who is Todd Cheney? We don't know. Who is he? Well, who are you?
I'm a lifelong New Britanite that is just willing to listen to the people. I mean, people know that I'm a member of the Green Party, but I have a lot of Republican friends who are behind me. We have very different viewpoints, but we're able to, go grab a beer and talk things over.
And in general, if you had to mention sort of one idea that symbolizes what you're running for, what you'd be pushing for as a member of the General Assembly, what would that be?
So my biggest issue is the way the state deals with the education cost-sharing formula. I actually got this idea from one of the Republican candidates running for House Representative in the 24th District. Essentially, we just need to overhaul the entire formula, work better. Bobby Sanchez of the 25th District said he'd like to see the state fund 100% of New Britain's education costs, but he didn't really give an idea of how to do that. There's a way we could work out the formula where we would be providing 100% of the costs for cities such as New Britain, but it wouldn't be a permanent thing. It would be once you get back beyond these barriers, you would start taking responsibility for part of the cost.
We'll pause that idea for a second. I want to make sure we meet here in this first segment all the members of our panel. So our last, but certainly not least, is Linda Louise Lacasse, a petitioning candidate, which means you've got onto the ballot via petition for state representative in the 52nd District of Somers and Stafford. First of all, tell us, why are you running?
Number one, I love Stafford and I love Somers. I've devoted my last 26 years in charity work in both towns, from the American Legion Executive Board to the Catholic Daughters to the General Federated Women's Clubs, the Rotary, the Northern Connecticut Land Trust. And my husband's a soldier, and he has 16 more months, and he's in the National Guard. He was in Afghanistan, and we're very devoted to local politics, state politics, and, of course, our nation.
Is there a particular thing that you the same question I've sort of been asking everybody. I mean, an idea, a policy that you're kind of known for that energizes your campaign?
First and foremost is my charitable giving, I think, is the most important thing. I'm in the trenches, so I'm involved with children, teaching 8th graders faith formation. I have a girls' club called the Earth Angels. They're 11 to 18. And I'm in the trenches. I know who's homeless, I know who's hurting, and I know who's hungry.
I guess what I'm also asking, though, is let's say you got elected to the General Assembly. I mean, would there be a bill that you'd be proposing, a particular area of policy that you'd be pursuing?
Well, first and foremost, Penny Bacchiacchi was the leader of our district for 6 terms, 12 years. And she didn't win the lieutenant governor's position on the Republican ticket. 108 people from Stafford did not vote for her, and 208 from Somers did not vote for her. That was 316 voters. She lost by a slim margin of 700, and the biggest concern of the people that lived in her district was that she was out of touch with them. So it's real simple, ABC. I'm approachable, I'm available, and all aboard. I have an 800 line, 1-800-US-LINDA. I've had it for 26 years. When cell phones were not part of our game plan, I wanted my 4 children to always be available to me. And so 87 was U.S., and 12 years into the game, someone said, is this 1-800-US Linda? And I said, by golly, it is. 87 is the number of my home. So first and foremost, I believe every rep should have an 800 line so that they can be available to their constituents, just like a priest is available to its congregation or the minister is available. You need to be available if people are hurting. They need to be able to reach you. I'm right in the trenches of Somersville, Connecticut, Route 190. So I live with all the mill houses that are there. And B, I'm a bridge builder. My gift is I'm the oldest of 5 girls. My mother was a widow at 22, and I've always been the one that had to do things first. Even when it became protecting my little sisters, I was there, ready, willing, and able. And C, Connecticut still is the Constitution state. So our culture, our Constitution is being compromised, and I believe we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and last but not least, be there. Be there.
Right, so you've plagiarized your entire campaign statement. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so...
Rah-rah tiskumba for you, Colin.
All right, so here we
Why
go.
reinvent the wheel?
Right, exactly. So let's grab a quick break here. I want to talk to these folks about just how hard this really is, particularly if you don't live in Willimantic. We'll come back after this.
Know your French candidates.
Are you rolling on this, Patrick? Okay,
I
good.
said get to know your French candidates. Crazy ass French candidates. Not a chance in hell of getting elected. French candidates. French candidates. And then you have something from the something party, yeah. And then you have him speak, just a little. Yeah, then you have dun 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 dun.
You've gotten into this more than anybody.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That, of course, was the McLovins playing the Get to Know Your French Candidates love theme. All right, so we are talking to write-in candidates, petitioning candidates, third-party candidates, and one of the things that all of you have in common is this is just way too hard. And Rolf, just for a second, I want to focus for a moment on the Citizens Election Program, because you're a candidate from the Green Party. You're also a write-in candidate. We'll get to that in a second. But a candidate from the Green Party, you guys got ballot position. You got a lot of things that would be pretty helpful for a third-party candidate. But I'm assuming none of you has managed to qualify for the Citizens Election Program. This is the program that provides public financing of political campaigns. It's extraordinarily difficult for third parties to get there. I'm assuming nobody from the Green Party did it this time.
Not to my knowledge. I was just talking with Ernie in the lobby before. It's kind of like if you have an insurance policy, it's kind of like a deductible. You have to reach a certain measure of expenses of your own before something else kicks in to help you out. It's just a convention that's just designed to keep the system in the hands of the two parties that think they have the right to control the political system.
I mean, this is just to sort of make it clear. Not only do you have to do everything that a major party candidate would do, but you have to collect signatures, way more signatures than you need to get onto the ballot. Right. What are you going to say, Ernie? Go ahead. Just chime in.
I was going to say it's double. You have to give double the money, double the signatures. And I found this out because I was the treasurer for a person who ran the Republican Party a few years ago. And I was at a meeting, and this third-party candidate stands up and says, why do I have to get twice as many and twice as much money to get the same amount that these people are? And they really didn't have a great answer.
You would have to get, I think, for a full grant and a statewide run, 220,000 signatures, something like that, I think. I mean, that's a really hard thing to do. You have to get 20% of the electorate. It's some insane thing like that. To qualify for a full grant, you can also qualify for partial grants by getting to 10 or to 15%. But this is still, even the 10%, that's like 110,000 signatures. That's really, really hard to do, prohibitively hard to do. That doesn't seem fair. So I want to just quickly go to the whole write-in question for a second. Todd, this is going to be the hardest thing in the world to do. I mean, in terms of qualifying, I don't think you have to do too much other than get your signature, get your name registered with the Secretary of State, right?
Yeah, I mean, that part was easy. I just went up to Hartford and handed in a piece of paper with my name on it, basically. But I mean, I'm not appearing on the ballot. Anyone who doesn't know my name, who doesn't know that I'm running, they don't know that I'm even available to be voted for. They're just going to fill in the bubble for my opponent just because she's the only one there.
So what can you do about that? What have you figured out at a grassroots level or a shirt sleeves level or whatever you want to call it? What are you going to do about that?
Well, the big thing is I just have friends and family helping me out. Everyone's just posting on Facebook, hey, my friend Todd is running for this. Write him in. Bottom line, column 3, row G, just write it in.
Are you allowed to accept campaign donations? Like if I wanted to give you like $10 for lawn signs or something like that, could I do that?
I could accept campaign contributions, but I'm not because it significantly complicates the process.
Yeah. Okay. So, but you conceivably could. All right. So, but it's more paperwork, more stuff like that.
Quite a bit more.
Yeah. So you have to have people signing forms and reporting stuff and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I don't have the time to do.
You don't want to
any
get
of
into
that.
Yeah. So, Ernie, I mean, I think you've been able to see this a few different ways, right? I mean, from different perspectives, from this perspective of conventional politics, from the convention of third-party politics. I mean, how does it look to you in terms of the barriers? You've managed to establish the bottom line party in your town anyway as, not just an ad hoc thing, but an ongoing multi-cycle force.
Absolutely. My ace in the hole was that I was on Zoning Board of Appeals for like 10 years, and I was a selectman, and then I was also elected as mayor, so I have name recognition, which always helps when you're running for anywhere. But as far as the state rep, you need a little more than just name recognition. You need a little bit of, oomph in what you're going to do. But last year, I ran into a barrier. What happened was the Democrats and Republicans had put a bill together, and it was a 2-page line and a 90-page document that said that the third parties had to sign an extra piece of paper saying that they're running for whatever office. And the town clerk did not pick up on it. They did not send it to the third party, our chairperson. And so it came down to a point where Ernie can't be on the ballot. What do you mean Ernie can't be on the ballot? He can't be on the ballot. So we had to go to court, get a judge to give us a judgment against the town clerk and force that person to put me on the ballot. And so they've tried to put barriers in your way. There's just absolutely no doubt about it. It was because I believe what had happened was some candidate was put on a third-party ballot that said, I didn't plan on that. Nobody told me or asked me to be on that ballot. So they decided that they would put a little barrier in your way. But it's something that's unusual. And Denise Merrill and I are very good friends. And I called Denise and I said, hey, you got to straighten this out. And she said, I can't do a thing about it. So, but we ended up going to court. And there was other people also over Middletown and Belltown in that area. Some of those lost their third-party bid because of that.
I think last cycle around we had somebody from Middletown who was in the middle of a fight not unlike yours.
Yes.
So, Linda, I know one thing that you believe is that we live in a new era. Not only do you have a 1-800 phone line from the 1980s, but, I mean, we live in an era of social media where maybe you can kind of go around some of the typical barriers and get in touch with people using other kinds of means. How's that worked so far?
Well, I have my 1-800-US Linda banners all over the place, from Stafford to Summers. I've been campaigning with my campaign mobile, which said Linda Louise serves Stafford and Summers with passion and purpose. So that's been riding around town for the last several months. I have my signs, as you can see here. There's my beautiful face.
Right. If
and notice, gents, since I'm the only rose in this group of thorns here, that it just says Linda Louise, because I'm like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'll be back. And I don't like to waste paper, because if you waste paper, what happens? we throw it in the trash bins. Not this sign. This is going to be used from now until the Messiah comes, baby. Watch out. And there's my face, just in case.
If you can overcome your natural streak of shyness and reticence, I think you may have something. Now, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you tried to petition into the Republican primary initially, and that didn't work out too well for you, right?
Well, it worked out beautifully. There was a glitch, though. Being unfamiliar with the particulars, I didn't realize that the Democrats that switched to Republicans had a 90-day grace period.
Yes.
So 13 of those people didn't count. And then another dear neighbor and friend, she got 13 signatures, but she neglected to notarize it with the Notary Republic. So I was 3 signatures short. But you know what? It was divine providence, because my intention was always to be unaffiliated, because come heaven or high water, I was going to be on that ballot no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Actually, Providence voters are not allowed to vote in Stafford or Somers. All right. So, by the way, as we go along here, we'll take Dan's call in just a second, 860-275-7266. Rolf, how complicated is all the paperwork?
Well, in my experience, we've had to go to the Secretary of State's office a couple of times. First time, I submitted a form to get a petition so I could collect signatures. When I was running for a state representative, I got a phone call from the office stating that they weren't even going to send the form to me because it was already too late. So we had to go there to prove to them that we did, in fact, send it on time. And it came down to an issue that it was a matter of somebody picking up the mail from a mailbox and walking it across the hall or to another building. And that was the reason for the delay. So I ended up having to run as a write-in candidate. Another thing that's complicated is what's going on at the polling sites. The people that man the polls are just really uneducated, and the Secretary of State's office doesn't seem to be interested in appropriately training people. So, I'm as a write-in candidate for treasurer. Todd's running as a write-in candidate. If you go to the polling sites, you often have to deal with people, the poll workers. If a voter is there and says they want to write for a write-in candidate, sometimes the poll workers will say there's no such thing. We've tried to deal with the Secretary of State's office to say, well, can't we post the names of these people in the polling site? And the closest we can get to them to a definitive response is that, well, there's no law that says we have to. I mean, there's not a very productive attitude. So, there's a lot of this sort of haranguing going on and paperwork issues, and there's also been problems with polling machines. We've had to, I got like a handful of extra votes that I found out were kept in an envelope of the Registrar of Voters in Stamford. And all this came about because a friend of ours who's a Democrat was working at the polls, and he noticed somebody was opening up one of the machines. You sip the paper into it, circle, fill in the hole, fill in the dots. And this was reported to the Secretary of State's, the Treasury Registrar of Voters. But her attitude about it was very defensive, and she wrote down the name of the person that was being vigilant and said, well, he's not going to be working at the polls anymore. So it seems that there's a combination of just vested interests and just lethargy. People are used to having things be a certain way, so they don't realize that a real democratic system should have not just 3, it should have 4 or 5 parties.
And maybe a chance for somebody to run as a write-in candidate. Todd, as running in a smaller pond, you're playing small ball a little bit compared to trying to run a statewide campaign for a write-in. We should say that it's not undoable. I mean, Mike Jarjura, maybe not the most typical example, but somehow or other as incumbent mayor of Waterbury in a recent cycle, had to run as a write-in candidate. Only in Waterbury could this happen, but also only he won. He just made the whole campaign about being a write-in candidate, and he got reelected. But so, Todd, for you at least can be at every, or have somebody at every polling place that's relevant to your run, I would assume. At least to sort of, even to stand out there at the limit, the 75-foot limit or whatever it is, with a sign that says how to spell your name and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have a fairly large contingent of friends and family who have told me, you get a sign, I'll stand out there all day and hold it. I've got a lot, like I said, I have a lot of Republican friends. They didn't manage to put up a candidate for this position. So the whole Republican Party is backing me, which is kind of strange for a member of the Green Party.
Well, it's weird because we do this show every cycle, and I've discovered one of the things that happens, and I think it probably happened for you guys a little bit down in the lobby. It was John Mertens was running, who's a very left-wing kind of guy, who was running, I think maybe on the independent party line, I can't remember, and Tom Marsh was running on, I can't remember who was running for what party, but anyway, when we did the show, it turned out these guys who had very different political beliefs had been touring around the state, sharing the burdens, the slings and arrows of having to be a third-party candidate, and it had united them in a way that their ideologies never could have, and I mean they had more in common as a result of having to do that. So I'm sort of not surprised that Republicans are rallying around you. In some ways, this kind of cuts through ideology. Ernie, do you find, we're going to have to go to a break here pretty soon, do you find that it's difficult to get taken seriously? You have a party called the Bottom Line Party, which almost sounds like, it doesn't sound like a party anybody's ever heard of. You're a third-party candidate. I mean, is it hard to get the same kind of gravitas projected onto you that would be from a major party candidate?
Not at this time.
Mm-hmm.
When I originally ran, yes, because I think that the perception of a third-party candidate or write-in candidate is that the person is kind of either way out in left field somewhere or maybe came down from outer space. But I'm not that type of a person. You just get disenchanted with two parties, and you just want to be someone who's a servant for the community. And I can take it seriously. They can take it seriously now. But when I started, yes, they all felt as though. Even my mom said, "Hey, what? You're going to run a third party? Do you know how hard it is?" And my mom is my biggest supporter, my biggest critic. So
it's like being a pro se defendant. Everybody just assumes you got to be nuts to be trying to do this this way. All right, here's Dan in Willimantic from Ernie's neck of the woods here. Hi, Dan. You're on the air.
Hi. Basically, you were hitting on the same question that I had. Historically, people just kind of like look at it and say, well, we got two parties, Republican and Democrat. And they don't really give a thought or have an inclination that maybe perhaps there's something else out there for me, the voter. How do these candidates, how do they face that challenge of being, well, I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat, I am X. And people are not used to X. How do you overcome that? Well,
let me just shift this over to Linda for a second, too. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's A, there's B, there's C. I believe B is bridge builder. Yes. I knew that. Okay, so what we've seen here, and one of the things I think that people in general are demoralized by, is a growing sense of polarization between the two parties. To a certain degree, that's true in the state General Assembly. At the national level, it is almost impossible to arrive at consensus. The two parties seem to be more invested in fighting with one another than they are at reconciliation. So do you position yourself, given that B stands for bridge builder, as somebody who can get beyond that somehow?
You use the word demoralized. I'd use the word disenfranchised. There's 5,000 unaffiliated between the towns of Stafford and Somers. There's 2,500 Republicans, and there's 5,400 Democrats. So the numbers are on my side because most of the Democrats that were Democrats have switched to being Republican only because of my enchantment. But at the end of the day, between those that love me on all three segments of society, I'm in it to win it.
All right. Does anybody else want to sort of comment on this whole question of polarization? It does seem as though, a congressman who's been serving for, let's say, the last 8 years or 10 years there's a good chance that congressman's never been on what they call a committee of correspondence, which is when they try to reconcile bills from different chambers and stuff, because they don't do it anymore because they don't ever reconcile bills. They don't. This is a system where enmity seems to be more important than accomplishing anything. Rolf, I'm assuming this is one of the things that you're extremely troubled by.
Well, I actually take the opposite position. I try to communicate to people that the two parties do, in fact, work a lot. If you just compare the assertions, for instance, in the 4th District, the House, we had Christopher Shays, then we had Jim Himes. And if you listen to how they speak, they use the same phraseology. Like when the Patriot Act was passed, Chris Shays pointed out, well, he voted for it, but he's going to keep an eye on it because it's subject to abuse. Never mind the fact that it's designed already to abuse our rights. Then Himes comes along, and then with the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act, he says exactly the same thing. I'm going to keep an eye on it. Never mind the fact that he voted for it, and it gives the president dictatorial power. So I like to point out, for another example, is that, speaking of the National Defense Authorization Act, Obama ran against McCain. after he won the election, when his second term, this was passed. It allows him to essentially abduct any U.S. citizen, put them in a kangaroo court situation associated with terrorism without, meeting your, having habeas corpus is pretty much thrown out the window. And now the president has fought. He lost a suit in New York, led by Chris Hedges and other journalists, but he took it to a higher court, took it to the Supreme Court to appeal it because he wants this authority for the presidency. But the interesting thing is that the current version of the National Defense Authorization Act was co-sponsored by John McCain.
Mm-hmm. So I take your point, which is in some ways not a dime's worth of difference. In other ways, too committed to fighting these things out to a stalemate. We're going to take a quick break here. I don't want to run out of time. I want to make sure we have time for everything else on the other side here. So our number, remember, 860-275-7266. You may tweet us at WNPR Colin. We'll be back after this hip-hop version. Get to know the candidates on the fringe. Everything they do is bound to impinge. They make a lot of noise like a squeaky hinge. Everything they represent, it's got kind of a tinge. Maybe they're nosy and maybe they're pesky. They get messed up like Ken Krajewski. It's kind of hard to represent when you're Vanilla Ice, so I'm handing it off to Self-Suffice.
Oh, Self-Suffice, got some advice, cause a lot of politicians get hated, but it's just because they're not nominated. A lot of more people need to have their voice. It's called representation, the point of taxation. When we come through, let's have an examination of the fringe candidates. And for matter of fact, let's end the discussion when we shout out to people just like Chris Hutchinson, who be saying their own points of view, even if it might be annoying you.
Remember, if you write in my name, you have to write it as Kyone Marie Julia Gladys Khalil Danger Onion Estlin Morrison Walker Wolf IV, or it won't count as a vote for me. And don't forget there's an I in Gladys, not Y. Today's show was produced by Betsy Kaplan and me, with help from our interns Jackie Filson and Josh Nalea. Greg Hill appeared in the intro and tweets for us at WNPR Colin. Katie Tolarski is our executive producer. The part of Bill Curry was played by H. Ross Perot. For show pages, articles, and the Faith Middleton Show staff's recipe for third-party fundraising lasagna, visit our website, WNPR.org. On tomorrow's show, how long should people live? And now, back to Colin.
Yeah, tomorrow's show is particularly based on the latest medical advances in life extension and the anticipated medical advances in life extension. It's going to be the case that what we think of as a normal human lifespan will, in fact, be extended by many, many years. But is this a good thing? Is it an ethical thing? Are there other things that we need to consider as we extend people's lifespans well into the 100s? All right, so that's coming up then. Right now, we're talking about third-party candidates, write-in candidates, 860-275-7266. If you have a question or a comment, 860-275-7266. You may also tweet us at WNPR Colin. I want to talk a little bit about how the media handles this stuff. Now, if you're running on a more small ball level in a town where there's a local press, maybe you get a little bit more attention. Although Todd Cheney, I'm thinking as a write-in candidate, I don't know. I mean, has anybody covered you? Have you been able to get any news media coverage at all?
Well, actually, the New Britain Herald wrote up a little article about me. My family has been interviewed by them a couple times for some fundraising we do, so they were pretty familiar with me when they saw my name pop up.
And one of the things that does – well, actually, let me just ask you all a little bit more about that. Ernie, I'm assuming the bottom line's been around in Willimantic long enough so that at least locally, and that's all that really counts in an election like yours, you can get some kind of coverage?
Absolutely correct. We have our own hometown newspaper, and I'm fortunate because being the mayor of the town, I'm in the paper all the time talking about the issues that are in town. So I get the coverage that I need through that local paper, and they have been excellent to me. And we have a local radio station also, and my wife and I have a radio show that we do, and I can't do it right now because I'm running for office, so she's carrying on for me. But yes, the the media has been good to us, but not necessarily special to me and not special to my opponent, but they're excellent as far as coverage.
Linda Louise, what about you? Does the media take you seriously?
Oh, I've been very blessed with the Post and Email internet newspaper. She did a 5-page article on me, then she did another follow-up, and then she just did another follow-up yesterday, and then the Northern Connecticut newspaper, that's our local paper as well. It comes out once a month. So they were very generous, and the JI also is very generous with me. So, and then I was on the Dan Lavallo show. I was on a podcast, and I'll be on WDRC on Saturday morning. So I have been indeed ingratiated. Is that the word? Gratiated. I am grateful for their attention of me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's impressive, actually. This isn't the Little Orphan Annie story that I'd intended to tell in this segment. Except, Rolf, I know the Green Party never feels as though it's really sort of given the kind of attention or status that is warranted given how long the Greens have been around.
Yeah, well, this round for me, it's really been quite positive. I was interviewed at the Connecticut Post. They also did a video candidate interview with me. Also, the Hartford Courant and the New Haven Register just yesterday. And of course, there was only one debate in the state for the offices I'm running for. I was included in that, and so
not bad.
Yeah, and I think what it's attributed to is that there were 2 private polls between August and October. The first one indicated that Connecticut voters would be interested in voting for me. I got 8% of the vote in this one. This was from a company, I think, in Florida. The next one that was found out through one of the reporters, the Hartford Courant, and this is why they called me in, I believe, for the editorial interview, was the reporter looked it up, but he used a different polling organization in, I think, North Carolina, and they found that my rating had increased to 12%. So I attribute this that people are just looking for other options. It's quite clear that with the 2 parties that we have, and they're sort of like 2 branches of one corporate interest, that the similarities are becoming more obviously greater than the differences.
All right, we actually sent one of our roving reporters out on the street to ask about third-party candidates. Should we hear Vox number 1 then? It sounds like we have a couple little clips there. Why don't you play that now?
Why do you think we don't hear more about third-party candidates?
We probably don't hear as much because they just don't have the financial backing that the other candidates do, because they have huge parties, pushing them forward, and that's the main thing.
Probably don't hear about them because hikers were controlled by the government. They probably control the money and whose voice and who gets seen, who knows who. Talking like the underdogs, right? Yeah, they're unknown. Yeah.
I feel like the news sometimes is biased and can be strong-armed, and we don't hear about candidates that we should hear about, and there should be more of a grassroots movement so we can understand more.
I think the news is just inundated with the political battle between Republicans and Democrats, and so I think so many people are consumed with that the third-party candidate doesn't really have a voice, and so unfortunately they kind of get pushed to the side.
I think Josh and Alea collected those voices. I think we have some more, too. We'll put it up on our website, WNPR.org, later. Very quickly, running out of time here. It only really applies, I think, to 2 of you. Not an issue for Todd. I think less of an issue for Ernie. But the word spoiler, the S word, comes up sometimes. It probably comes up maybe a little bit for Linda Louise and for you, Rolf. Linda Louise, has anybody called you a spoiler, said that you're basically going to... I assume that if you pulled votes from anybody, you'd pull votes from the Republican nominee.
The S word is salvation, not spoiler.
Okay.
And Rolf, I agree with you. It's the same bird with 2 different wings, the R wing and the D wing. I believe I am a refreshment to what's out there.
Yeah.
People cannot wait to see me at that LOB, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right. I can't wait to see you at the LOB. I promise you that. So, Rolf, what about that? How about the S word?
Well, when I first heard about it, I was talking about this in the lobby with the others. I'm assuming the term didn't exist before the 2000 election. But for me, that's just an admission that the 2 prevailing parties don't want – it's an admission they only want them to be defining the race. If they were really interested in a competitive race, they would be welcoming of other entrants. of course, you could take the attitude, and analogically, to how can you spoil a system that's already corrupt?
Good point. All right. All I've got time to do is thank you and make sure that people check you out. Rolf Moore, running for a state comptroller as a Green Party candidate and state treasurer as a write-in. Mayor Ernest Eldridge is a candidate for state rep from the 49th District. Todd Cheney, running as a write-in candidate in the 6th Senate District, New Britain and Berlin. Linda Louise Lacasse, petitioning candidate for state rep in the 52nd. That's Summers and Stafford. Thanks for coming in today. We'll be back tomorrow.
Candidates seem rude, but what's really rude is not being inclusive. So let's hear what they say and not be elusive. And you know that politicians seduce us with all kinds of messages, but what the truth is, if you want to know, hit the Colin McEnroe show. Mandate, fringe candidates. Fringe candidates.
Okay, that was perfect. Awesome, you guys.
I'm Kyone Wolf, running with the Humble Brag Party. Your inflatable rubber tube should be tax-free. It's so much nicer than my 80-foot yacht because you get to be closer to the water.